Welcome into episode 4. This is going to involve that glazing process. So what we did with the shaded base coat is we just tried to set up some basic lights and darks. Now we're going to enhance those, and of course we have our usual liner paints. We're really going to see an awful lot of these two. The red and blue liner, especially at this stage. And what I've got here, I like to keep these little lids from milk containers and whatever. This is basically the water I'm going to use to work my glazes. Now I'll show you in a second as I get this blue liner out on the palette. A couple things. This is something I used to use a lot of. Flow Improver, whatever, Reaper makes some, Vallejo makes some, a lot of companies make something like this. Used to use it a lot, just don't use it that much anymore. Because these paints, the liner paints, the clear paints that I enjoy so much, they work just fine with water. So see, as I look at how that just gives you some, I mean, this is almost 90% water, but yet look at how deep and dark and rich that is. So what we're going to do is, and now some people even ask me, well, what's a glaze? I usually respond with a glaze is a very controlled wash. So we're going to try and control this. We got some sponges here if need be, and I've got a few of my makeup sponges left, so I'll have those on hand. And remember, like what we saw in the last color test episode, we're going to try and use gravity in our favor here. And I'm using sort of a natural, this is a natural position. I'm stopping here, I'm not just having this go over the side because I want to be able to control this. And here's, see, another thing I can do. I can use this sponge. See how it took some of that away. And now we've got some shadow here and up here. So it already enhances just a little tiny bit that we just did, enhances that entire area. So let's have a little bit of that blue in there. And again, find an area that's on camera, first of all. And now down over the top. And what's going to happen is you'll see it tones down the markings. They're nowhere near as bright as they were. Tones those right down. And the more of the liner paint I put in there, the darker it's going to be. But you can see how gravity just took the paint right down here. Took it right down here. Look at now I've got my texture back in here. What's nifty about the liner paints and even the clear paints as opposed to inks or whatever is these dry very, very flat. It's what they do well. So why not take advantage of that? See, if I take some away, try not to take too much away, or it's because otherwise, I'd have to go in here and restore each of those lines. We don't want to have to do that. Here we go. And over the top. The other reason I like to do it with these brushes is since they are basically watercolor brushes, means that they're designed to hold a whole bunch of paint. Whole bunch of paint. That means I can put a whole bunch of water in here and not have to keep constantly going back to the palette. Now, can you see this here? I know it's a little bit tough, but watch what happens here on the face. Before there was just there's no shape there whatsoever. And now some of the lights and darks start to stand out a little bit. And here I'm not going to put worry about too much light being preserved on that arm because, well, we want the object source lighting to hit that. And just I guess start at the top and let gravity work its way down. And that's a good initial glazer because you can glaze multiple times. You don't have to just do it once and get it all in that first glaze. Do that multiple times. Here, let's show you the difference between the two. Check that out. Big difference there. I think you have to be able to kind of bear with the process. It's not like that the more traditional approach where you paint one tiny little area until it's completely done and move on to the next. Again, that's how we used to do things. And then we realized that, especially for the work that I needed to do, this was a better approach. So again, we set that down, we take some away, but not everywhere. Maybe this sponge is easier to reach things with. See, it's taking some off of there. And then I can proceed to the rest of this. Again, starting at the top. Gonna work the way down. All the way down. See, I can even remove it with my finger. And you notice how I say I have my original blobs up here of liner paint. And every so often you see me maybe add a little more water. That's to see a little more water to lighten it up. Maybe even a little red to warm it up. I know I referred to warm and cool an awful lot, but it's kind of simple to grasp. It's red is warm and blue is cool. So again, the underside of that has to be dark because if it's not dark, that green light's really not going to show very much on there. And I may just take my finger in some places, have a dab at it. Or there's the hand here, just try and remember I can be a little more precise and careful at this stage. If this was something where I needed to get the whole unit done in kind of a hurry without having to go back and forth a lot, I would be even more light and careful with each glaze layer, but this is a little bit different here. I just can't be that careful and still have things on camera all at the same time. So we're going to move on to our next one here. Again, it makes a big difference. And this is another reason why I don't use the wet palette, because with Shaded Basecoat, you could tell probably that I was working with colors that were a little more on the dry side. And if I've got a wet palette, well, it's going to affect that in a way that I don't want it to be affected. So there, see there's a little more red there, and then it translates into a little bit more blue. So we've got that set up now. And look at how the gold starts to have a little more contrast because we've got a darker color behind it. The hair starts to show up a little bit more because the skin is getting darkened down to where it's more the level we want it to be. Again here, I can pull some of that away if I feel I need to, and so I'm gonna take some blue here. This is the other reason why I like to do the glazing, because it's, I don't want to say it's cheating, but it's a way for me to get a lot more sneaky color transitions without having to mix all of that in some opaque fashion. So sorry, I just have to stick a brush in there. There's no easy way for me to do that and actually get it all on camera for you. Sorry about that. And go back to this, take some away. You can see how it did even just the lightest touch removes enough color to have an impact. And over the arms here. Hand. Back to the face. Again, you don't need to see me paint 4 faces. You've kind of seen the detail things already. What I'm going to do is just kind of lock down on a couple, especially the unit champion, since we want to do our object source lighting on that. So here, straight down, especially here, need to remove that bit right there. I'm going to leave this dark here because again I want some reflected stuff, but see how it's filled in. I don't want to lose my darks in the crevices there. And again, make this dark. Once more. Get my brush up under there, again, where you pretty much can't see it. I love these brushes because they just, you can see they take a lot of punishment, but they can hold a lot of paint. They can still hold their edges. Almost. So let's remove a few things here. Not too much, spit. So there we have. We've got the skin. This one, even though it's still taking a little bit to dry. So what we're gonna do is got some of this yellow ochre / griffin tan back out on the palette, and what's going to happen is we're going to take a little bit of this. Now notice how this is more opaque here. So it's not going to be as translucent as when it was just straight up red liner. So it's a little more opaque, and this also kind of makes people go, huh, what's going on? And I'm going to do this on some of these, on the quiver and on the arrows. So now watch how the areas that are gold, see how I just touch it there and the liquid just kind of seeps down. So by default, see how we've got a difference between the gold now and that. Instead of having to paint all that in, see, and now I've got another brush here. See, what I can do is take some of this away. There, you can see that. Let's do a similar thing here on our bow, or arrows, sorry. And we're even going to cover up the white there. See, I'm getting into my blue a little bit, but then back into the other mixture and sponge. So now I've got my white-ish feathers back, and so now I have a bunch of shading in there now. So we'll compare. This is a good one. So you see the difference in the two. I'll do this one now. And there. See, I like to have these other colors handy because sometimes I just like to shift what I'm doing. See, a little bit of there. By leaving this alone, I can do the same thing here. Now, in watercolor terms, they call that painting the negative space. You're painting around what's there. You're not painting. You notice I didn't paint those gold areas. I painted all the stuff around them. And what that did by default, it made contrast, so you now see those lighter areas of the golds. But I always have, see, I still have my darker color here that can go in on the other side and do that. And we'll get on to the next one here. So I realize that, see, I'm also trying not to, I don't know, overdose with information. I don't want to give you too much to have to process. But here's that negative space again. See, I stop there. Stop there. Here. So these are the leather strap type things. If you want to, you can use a finer brush. I sometimes used to have way more of these back in the day. So these are liner brushes, and once they got beat up a little bit, they were actually very handy for this function. But then I discovered these brushes, and I went to using these. So there's that same idea. Same idea. Then I got my blue here. It doesn't matter, how dark I go. I can always wipe it away. And sponge. So it didn't take long. Here, we've got this. Look at how I'm just bouncing around between these three. That's the other thing that I like. Look at that. We'll just see all of a sudden now that blade handle, instant shape. You know, while I'm at it, if I go more towards the just the blue liner here, and the arrow points. So it's not just that we made it darker, but now it's a little more bluish. So I'm gonna grab this one and go back and do the same thing. And on to the next one. This one's got an extra, it looks like an arrowhead stuck on the quiver. I don't know. Yeah, I think you can still see that. It's in a tough spot, so you can see that some of my negative painting, I ended up hitting some of that, but that's where the sponge comes along. Same thing, I'm just going to throw my shading onto that spear point, or arrowhead, and do that. Again, I got my blue liner handy for the arrow point. Can always wipe it away. And here I'm just going to go over the shaft of the arrow. Now, champion is going to be different. Yeah, there is no arrow there. So actually I'm going to go back to that, sorry. I do believe, yeah, we've got enough here. So we're going to do a little more glazing that's in the yellow range. I say it almost looks opaque here. I know that it looks a little weird. But this will be the last part of this segment that I do, and then I'll probably do the hair and then another round of glazing on the body and such. So look what we're doing here. This is sort of a reddish tan mix. I always have my sponge handy. And if it gets too opaque, too dark, well, that's what the water is for. And remember to give it more of a metal look. See how the green went down there? We're setting up that green. We have to have these darker shadows in here. Otherwise the green's not, that reflected green, not gonna make a difference. It won't show up and register as a glow. It'll just register as some kind of greenish color on it, and that's about it. So again, sponge, take that away, but not all of it. And here on the breastplate, and I'm just glazing over this one little part here, not even the whole thing. See, just here. Same thing here. And this is where I start to determine, okay, how is some of this non-metallic stuff going to look? Because you have to have these transitions from light to dark to light again. And there's a lot of them. So there we go. And again, we're using the clear red for most of that glazing stuff, but also It's not 100% translucent. Let's move on to the next one here. And I can wipe away some of that. So I could have painted a whole bunch of layers, of, worked up from the darkest, whatever. But by doing this, I can almost in some ways get a more natural transition because I'm not forcing these different layers. It's just I'm kind of letting it happen a little bit on its own. I think that's what some people they don't like that because it's going to generate some randomness. You're rolling a d20. Sometimes 20s come up as 1s. And same thing here. So sometimes it's just a partial glaze. Like here, the reason I'm making that darker is because I want to have the skin color reflected onto... I have it reflected onto that part of the head crest or crown or whatever the heck it is. See how I just darkened up this half? That little chevron. And here, see I can even get some more water here and even throw a little bit of shading onto the quiver. There we go. That's number 2. Let's advance to number 3. This one has a little bit more of the yellow ochre color in there. See, sometimes I just take my hand. There wasn't really a particular reason why I went more with the yellow ochre there. Sometimes maybe when I did the shaded base coat part, I put more. I already had enough yellow ochre in there. I didn't feel like I needed some more. Or maybe I just wanted to make some parts of this a little bit darker than others. And by others, I mean the other members of the unit there. So hopefully, I know I'm really moving around fast. And sometimes I'm not doing the same thing on every single one. And this one I'm just going, let's mix some red and some of the blue together. Oh no, I need some contrast here, so I do wanna, I just need to darken that up a bit. And now on to the last one here. I'm gonna need just a bit more of that yellow ochre / griffin tan. By mixing the red liner with it, it keeps it more towards the brown, almost more of a burnt sienna type color. So what do we got here? And just like on our color test piece, I'm trying to create enough As up here, yes, there's a little bit of shading, but down here there's just a little bit more, and you can see that it just takes less time. You get more for less. Everybody likes more for less. And quiver. Sometimes I'll just almost go straight to the Griffin tan as a glaze. This is, remember I told you before, there's parts that you're just gonna have to, by practice and doing it multiple times, that's what's gonna help you figure out, well, why is Jim just putting that right there? Sometimes it's hard to explain why I had these transitions, why sometimes I grab more of a blue. See here, I'm just getting rid of some of the paint, taking away some of that glaze. It's just how my eyes saw it and said, I need more of this here. Like, see how I darkened that above that little piece of armor, whatever that is. So see, I'm taking the red and blue together. I just want to make that even darker. Alright, so we've got this pretty well established now. So what we're going to do is, while I've got this color out, in the next segment we're going to do a secondary glaze on some of the skin tones. Alright, we're going to get to some secondary glazes now. Got mostly same stuff out here, my red liner, my blue liner. And by secondary glazes, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. In some areas I sort of reinforce and darken the glazes. So we're going to do that right here. There's going to be a little less water. A little more controlled even. But in this segment, I'm also going to do another one of those little curveballs where we do light colored glazes. So see here, it's not black lining, that's a glaze. It's just a really, really targeted glaze. But here it's going to be a little more watery. And then I'm going to enhance the edge of that one dark zone there. And pick out a few darker zones here. And I'm going to do this just here and there on a few of these. Here's another glaze there. And here, I'm just darkening down that one portion. Same thing here on the armor piece there. Same thing maybe there on the... Yeah, I need some down here too. So see how that just enhanced that curve and that shadow a little bit, so I can take away some of the excess. And we'll go through each one of these. And the next thing that I'll throw your way, because this is, in a way, it's almost a little bit like what we did in the Shaded Basecoat, where we had to sort of break away from that and then do a tiny bit of glazing. Well, We got to get some glow under here, and I don't want people to think that establishing that glow is something that just happens in the finals. You may do establish where the final highlights of that are, the final reflections of where that is. But I also want to see, right? This is another case where, see, one more glaze just makes this darker. I'm going to grab my sponge here, so I'm just going to pull that up a little bit. So much easier to get that shading instead of having to go in and just one layer after another layer after another layer. And now here I'm not going as in depth on this part on each one as I would normally, because we're going to start focusing on some other stuff that you really haven't seen a lot. You didn't, in the color test, you didn't really get to see too much of basically the object source lighting, and that's why I've got my champion set up there. This is another case where, see, just let that sink down into those crevices there. So what have we got? We've got our greenish colors here. Got the verdigris pale green and the fluorescent. Also with an assist from the clear green. That's a color I think that I added afterwards from the original. And where's my, here it is. But if you remember, the fluorescent paint, well, look at how there's a big old blob of peanut butter there. Look at how thin that is. So this actually makes it a little more opaque. But because this is so translucent, it technically, you can call it a glaze. And lets me find, here's my champion. So, and screen. Yeah, that is intent. Now I don't want this to be it's not supposed to be this really bright thing. It's almost, I would almost prefer if it was almost kind of lit from the inside. So if that means the inner portions are going to be lighter and the outer portions would be a little bit darker. It's almost like it's lava. So what do you mean glazing? Well, here we go. Watch what we're going to do here. Now, I don't know. So can you see what I've been doing on the arm here? See how there's a hint of green there now. See on the armor there, a hint of green. But it's ever so slight. And we're also at a stage, let's say we just didn't like this. Let's say we wanted to go to magenta. And you identify early on, well, you know what, I don't like the green. I really think it should be magenta, or you don't want any kind of object source lighting at all. See, and I'm just kind of absent-mindedly doing the same thing here. Let's see how, since that's so translucent, and look at there on the hair, it's just an indication that it's there. See over the arrows. So now it's obvious it's going to be a little, you can just see it more here. And I'm going to ever so slightly, I'm going to put a little bit of this off of my hand. So hopefully you can see how that's starting to have its effect. It is, as it's drying, obviously it's shiny, so it's a little hard for you to see that, but once it's dry. Now I also have to have the glow down here. And again, this is not the final version of it. This is just, remember, glazing is about tinting. So I'm sort of gently tinting that towards the green. Yeah, I think you can see that. Even under here a little bit. So now I have to think about the green that's reflecting up from our bases. And just like I did, I think you can see it on the reference pictures, I'm just gonna glaze in a touch of green there. Same thing on the undersides of these. It's just so intense, doesn't take much. See, even here. This is a way to get a subtle introduction of this green, because once I start to put the really, really light version of this on there, you can see the difference in the two. All we're doing, that's why I'm calling this a glaze. Just figuring out how much of this I want. Where do I want the green to be? Especially on anything that, well, I feel is going to be a metal. Maybe less of a reflection on the hair or the face, but more on metals. See the difference there. I'm going to move on to the next one here. Making sure that this is done in a more translucent way. Just gonna reflect some of this here. That's it's always interesting when you're doing a unit, because all of a sudden you're doing one, you're kind of getting used to that, and then you have a whole nother shape like this. And you see how I still have my scales in there because I've just really gently gone over the top with this. Now here there's the glow against the armor comes from a different angle. And you can see how that's starting to align with the original reference picture. And when I see that get too bright, I can tone it down just like I did with my handy sponge. So obviously more green on this bottom section of the bow. Not so much here, maybe a little bit on the underside of that face. So glazes can be lighter. That was something I found out just by accident, and I'm trying to think of what miniature it was. I think it was some kind of a chaos figure, and lo and behold, I think I was trying to make one color last a little bit longer, and so it ended up being super thin, but it was lighter. I said, wait a minute, it's a light color, but it's making kind of a neat glaze. See, if that's too intense, guess what? I use my thumb palette, take some off the brush. I can use my thumb to take some off the miniature, or my sponge, and I can see why I put some more dark there. See the same thing happening here. Now this is also the reason why, yet another reason why I had these on the dowel rods, because it would have been tough to do this. What I just did there would have been really tough to do that if I had it stuck to the base. I think what I will do is do sort of a... As I'm doing this, I think I need to do a special episode where these are attached to the bases. It won't be a long one, it'll just kind of be a follow-up sort of thing. Because I don't want to spend 10-15 minutes on that. I like to spend more like 20 minutes, half an hour. Because once things go on the base, I usually make adjustments to them. So I'd like for you to see that. There is another instance here where after I do the glow stuff, then I'm going to do those lighter glazes again. So then we're marking out where this glow is going to happen. Even here on the face, underside of the hair. You can see if it gets too bright there. Because this stuff is so transparent, it's just really easy to knock it back down again. I think we're on the fourth one here. And since I have a little bit of this left, I might do, especially on the one that's got the critter there, might go back and do a little more on that one. So that's one where I have to decide, do I want the creature sort of to be lit from the inside, or do I want it to be more the traditional kind of dark on the inside and it just gets gradually lighter? But it might end up looking more like jade than something that's more spectral or conjured. And you can see this is... We're not waiting till the very, very end to do the lighting. We're incorporating it into the same old stage. So here we go. A little bit of glow here. This is another reason again why I made so much effort to get darker glazes in there. Can you see that? Yeah, I can see that. So you take some of that away. Some green here. A little reflection on the underside of the arrow. And I think we've got this one pretty well marked out. There's so much kind of blocking of the snake bit that's blocking the stuff here. I technically probably wouldn't have so much of that reflected stuff on there, but it also kind of makes that look a little more interesting. So we're going to do that. And so there are no such things as these creatures. So while you try to do the realism sort of thing, sometimes you can take a little bit of artistic license and have some fun. So we're going to go back to this one. Start to reinforce some areas here. See how that starts to get a little bit lighter. I think, yeah, it's mostly there on screen for you. This is nowhere near the final level of brightness for it at all. But you can see just how translucent all this is. So that's why we're counting it still as a glaze. Yep, we forgot. See, I forgot all about this section here. That's another reason why I don't just wait on that till the very end. At least do some of that. And the other reason too to figure out where I want to establish this glow is it's while I still have my darks. Alright, so we're going to need some context here. The dreaded word again of context. So what I am going to do, I'm going to lighten this up a little bit like this. What I might also do is make the glow up here a little bit more, add a little yellow to it, and that'll change it a bit. It won't be quite sync. Now look at how different this is going to be. You can see how that changes it around a little bit. And it's much lighter. Look at how much lighter that is than there we go. And definitely tone that down a tiny bit, and you'll see it here on the bottom too. Now it starts to make a bit of a difference. And you can see here there's not a lot to be afraid of as you work on your object source lighting at this stage, because like I said, you can go back and forth. But I don't want to get too involved. And that's why I'm going to just do a little bit more here. So again, where that gets too intense, wipe some of it away. Yeah, if I do too much, wipe it away. It's really starting to make this one pop here, because we want our unit champion to be distinctive. And so I'm not going to make the glow from the floor as intense as the glow that's being cast from the familiar there. Alright, while I've got this, glazing, remember it can go both ways, light to dark, dark to light. We're going to do, so here's our clear green, mixing it with some of that. That's remains of our fluorescent green. Now we've got this a little bit darker. And we'll see if we, yeah, see, I kind of like this effect here. See, I'm kind of going over the top. But the clear paints, when you thin them down, well, guess what? It's a nice thin application. It's transparent. But what you see, I like to pair up the clear paints with the fluorescent. So say clear red with the fluorescent orange, or clear yellow with the fluorescent yellow. They really just, they go together very well. So here we go. I'm going to tone this down. See how that, it makes it a little bit darker, but it actually gives it a little bit of life. This is what I did on the other one too, on that color test figure. Yeah, I'm liking that. Now if I go even more to the clear, I still got some of my clear blue, or blue liner left. That even darkens it down a little bit more. And my wings, yeah, that's what I wanted. Just for whatever reason, I liked the notion of this maybe having its own inner glow, almost, well, like somebody was holding a torch. You wouldn't make the flame part be the darkest. And that's what we're doing here, is kind of working from the inside out. Just like if you were painting a flame. And the idea here is that I'm not trying to paint the little guy before I paint the main champion figure. But by doing this now, I have a better idea later of what I can do. Because I can make adjustments to this just like it was just a regular figure. So all of this is still very translucent, but look at how dark it is. See, I'll go over the edges of that wing, and the darker this gets, the more intense the lighting effect becomes. And let me grab this So you can see the difference between but the principle is the same. This is just more of a greenish fire color. And we can refine this as much as we need to. But again, my clear green, I'm at the blue liner. And even here, I've got to darken some things down, I can see. So I am going to see what the difference that makes between these two. So clearly, yeah, I'm glad I did the glow like that, because that's really going to identify your champion figure there. So what I want to do is get into some glazing on the hair, and then do those, again, the light glazes like we did here on this stuff. Do some of that here on the armor to show you how to do some reflections on that. So that'll be the final segment in the glazing episode. So one of the last things I'll tackle in the glazing phase is the hair. We don't want to forget about that, which means we bring out the verdigris blue, verdigris pale green. I also have my blue liner out there. We're not going to use a lot of that. Not a whole bunch. But this will be sort of possibly a two-step process here. We do one glaze and then throw on another one. So this one is going to be a little bit lighter. This looks super opaque, but one of the nifty things about the Secret Weapon paints is they are designed to be used as glazes like this, even though they seem very opaque. So I'm going to get just a touch more, yeah, like so. Now, get this in the middle here. This is why it's a two-part glaze, because this is not so much about making things darker. It's just about refining. See, there's some rough patches from when we were doing our shaded base coat. So that's the other reason I like to do the glazing process. It's one way. Yeah, here we go. So it's not going to show up a whole bunch. But what we're also going to do is something like this. Remember those lighter glazes that we talked about? I'm going to do that right here. Right there. I'm going to get rid of some of the excess. Makes sense. So see how some of the yellow gold color still shows through. Just so much easier doing that than trying to just, again, layer all that stuff up. Gonna do the same thing on this side. This is why I stopped with the dark right here, and it's just ever so slight. And we can lighten that later, but it's an indication of where that's going to be for right now. So we're going to let that one dry. We'll move on to our next one. And this is at the end, it's less about establishing things that are darker. We got some decent darks on there. We have a long way to go on our highlights. But this is really the part I was looking forward to here. Now this one's not going to get quite as much because the crown or the thing is not as close to the hair as the other one. So I'll just stop there with that. Same thing right here. You can see I'm just in a few places. I say, oh, I'm gonna put some here. Why not? Let's get on to the next one here. Oops, sorry about that. I chose these guys because they do have all these interesting elements to them. I tried to have a little bit of metal, a little bit of object source lighting, a little bit of freehand. That's going to be the case for most of the units that I choose. It'll be a combination of trying to get you to see different techniques in different situations, because sometimes non-metallic on a, say, an orc or 40k orc is a little bit different than what you would put on a dark elf or a high elf or some kind of knight in very reflective armor where you might have more of the sky earth happening. So this one's really close, and since I made that crest relatively dark there, that's going to show up more. So it almost blends right into the hair as we do the same thing here and wipe away some of the excess. And there you go. And we'll see if our first one is dry enough for another application. Well, we're going to go to this one because I think there was a little less. So remember, we got our blue liner here. And I'll mix in a touch of this. So remember that the glazing can be very, very controlled. So see here, just with a little bit of a glaze, getting some stuff nice and dark here. Pick out a few strands. And the reason I'm disqualifying this as a glaze is, see how translucent that is? It looks like it's regular opaque painting, but it's not. And it's not black lining or anything like that. It's just a much more tightly controlled glaze. And when the highlights go over the top of that, I won't need white because I have the dark underneath. So sorry, I keep mashing into the camera there. The other thing is just getting this a little bit darker down here. Creates just a sense that there's a shadow effect. I'm just trying to, there's a really deep crevice there, just trying to get down into that. And just like my other glazes, I like to sometimes wipe the paint away. So here's another one. Again, I'm going to go into my blue liner. And just in some of these areas where there's just a lot of... See here, let's look at how this is going to be a little more defined. Again, without having to use white to say that, just it kind of seeps down in there. And look at my green glow that starts to show up a little bit more. So that little touch there. So I'm gonna even mute that down some more. What I'm trying to do is bring out this here, so that negative painting thing again. We do it here. Just painting around what's there and then leave it go. Let's do that here. Yeah, this really needs some serious shadows under here. Because what that's also going to do is make the gold of the headdress stand out a little more. And pick out some more of these strands also. Yeah, this needs a shadow here. And there's even another section here that just didn't even get paint. That's solved. What I'm going to do is, even on this one, why not, while I've got it. So to give you a little hint at the difference that makes. And this is another thing too, I can, with the hair, as I work lighter here, I can make it more of a seafoam green or more of a lighter blue. Here's the same brush I was using for glazing. So now that I've got those darks established, so I'm going to add a little touch of that. So remember, it's kind of the shaded base coat, then you kind of glaze things darker and poof. You pop on your highlight there. Same thing there. This one maybe not quite as bold, but same instance where we're just going to throw a little bit of a light over the top of that. And while I've got this, I can throw some lights on the arrow points. Maybe even a little bit on the arrow feathers. But it's still very transient. You can see how staying in the so-called limited palette thing. What about here? We reflect a little bit of the hair. Let me find another one. Yeah, I think this one can benefit from that. We haven't done anything that even remotely resembles the lightest highlight, because if you don't want to get into those yet. So again, to tone that down. And this is where I can get a little more of this. Yeah, it looks like it's on the screen. So a little bit of the hair color there. A little bit there. A little bit here. You can see the hair just starting to have more shape. So I will definitely have a 5th episode for this series here. I'm trying to, well, it's the longer you make an episode, like if this was one gigantic 4-hour thing, it would take so long to render and so long to upload that it wouldn't even be done before Gen Con. So that is why it's really more the rendering time that can get in the way and the upload time. Because as it is, yeah, we're gonna. There's so much more that I want to cover with the object source lighting. That was not originally what I was gonna do. It was just gonna be sort of a dragon, whatever, some kind of familiar thing, and then I realized it was a way to squeeze in a bit of object source lighting for you. So hopefully you don't mind it being one extra episode, and it'll be there for you once we get back from Gen Con. I think you'll have plenty to absorb between now and then, because I've already actually started working on the next 2 of these. I sort of needed the format, kind of the basic general format, what I was going to do, and then work from there. Because I knew, like the pledge said, it was going to be 4 or 5 parts. But I wasn't sure what I could cover until I actually got into it. So, the next episode, final one, we're going to paint up a couple of these more to their full range. We'll obviously do the object source lighting, and then we're going to drill out the holes for the bases, get these on the bases, and then see what sort of modifications need to be made from there. So thanks for watching this episode. Again, I know the shaded base coat in this one doesn't really leave you with, something like this, but I do think you'll enjoy it, and hopefully there's a lot of fun information in here for you. So thanks for watching, and catch you on the next one.